Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Great to see so many journalists in the room for this briefing ahead of the UNGA High Level Week. My name is Lenise Collins, and I will serve as the spokesperson for Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock's session of the General Assembly, the 80th session. And we're very excited to engage with you all, to speak with you all. You can always reach out to members of the team, including the Director of Communications, Nick Birnbach, who has joined us. He is there in the back of the room if you all want to take a look. But we are always here to answer any questions that you have. As you know, Her Excellency Baerbock is the fifth woman to preside over the General Assembly, and she will serve in a very momentous year. So she will make a few remarks, and then we'll have some time to take your questions. We will have to start the noon briefing, so we have until about 12:30. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock, the President of the 80th session of the General Assembly.
Thanks a lot, and good afternoon to all of you. It's my sincere privilege to be with you here today. And just as a head-ups, this will happen in a regular matter that I join you because the work of you and all the media you're representing behind you is of critical importance to me, but also to the UN itself. Because you are helping to hold our organization accountable, raising the tough issues and telling the stories to the 8 billion people globally who count on us to deliver and who do we serve. At the beginning of the opening of the 80th session last week, I spoke on the theme that will be guiding my presidency, Better Together. This theme reflects the reality that no single nation, regardless of its size, might, or wealth, can confront the challenges that we face all alone. We have to work together, better together. This organization was born in the moment of deep fracture, perhaps one of the darkest in human history. But it brought us the UN Charter. To this day, it is the North Star that guides our work and reminds us of what we want to accomplish together. But 80 years is a long time, almost double than my lifetime. And in these 80 years, it has changed a lot. The world has changed a lot. This is why, for me, it is now time to reflect and rebuild, to adapt and evolve for United Nations that will carry us through the next 8 decades. To show 8 billion people why this organization still matters. And to respond to the desperate calls for peace in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, and Haiti. To make meaningful action on collective challenges such as climate change, inequality, and rapid technology advance. Our task is to ensure that the UN stands strong for the next 80 years. The processes this year must be our focus. That includes advancing the UNGA80 reform agenda, ensuring that the UN becomes more effective and can deliver on its promises. It includes guiding the selection of the next Secretary General, the face and voice of this organization. And it includes building on the Pact for the future and ensuring its implementation. We need to regain momentum on the SDGs. This house was created for dialogue and diplomacy, and yes, for debate, to sort out our differences peacefully together. Next week's general debate, with an estimated 150 heads of states and government in attendance, is an opportunity to demonstrate exactly this. And I will use every opportunity to underscore the importance of this moment in history, to reaffirm our commitments to the UN Charter and the principles that it represents. The high-level week events to follow are also key opportunities. We have the United Nations 80th anniversary, which is a chance to reflect upon the achievements and role of the UN and to re-embrace the principles of the Charter, our life insurance. We have the high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solutions. This is a chance to address reality that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict cannot be resolved by endless war, continued occupation and terror. The only way to ensure that both Israelis and Palestinians can live in lasting peace, security and dignity is the two-state solution. The high-level meetings marking the 30th anniversaries of both the Fourth World Conference on Women and the World Programme of Action for Youth give us space to reflect on 3 decades of progress and, yes, setbacks, and to chart a path forward for equal rights for everyone. The high-level meeting on non-communicable diseases and mental health reflects the stark reality that non-infectious diseases are not only a leading cause of mortality, but in many cases entirely preventable and treatable. And the high-level conference to address the crisis facing Rohingya, Muslims and other minorities in Myanmar reflects the General Assembly's intention to support those most vulnerable and to draw attention to conflicts and human rights abuses that are too often forgotten. The high-level meeting to commemorate the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, a yearly gathering, regains renewed importance at a time when conflict and tensions are at a high point. So you can see we are not short on challenges or issues, yet we are also not short of engagement with significant attendance expected. What we have to do is turn this engagement into collective action. Yes, we are at a crossroads, a make or break moment. But this is precisely when we have to work harder. Our forebearers had the humility and grace to put aside their differences and work together in 1945. We need that same principles conviction today. 8 decades of progress and setbacks, of achievement and failure, of renewal and resolve have brought us here. Now we need the will and the ambition to turn promise into action, commitments into progress and hope into reality. That is the message I will deliver on Tuesday for the high-level week. And this is the message I will carry throughout the 80th session. I thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. If I could ask you all, as we get to know your names and faces, if you could introduce yourself with your name and your news organization. Desi. Valeria, please.
Thank you so much. Madam President, thank you so much for this press conference on behalf of the United Nations Correspondent Association. It's a real pleasure to see you in another role back to the United Nations. It's Valeria Robecco from Ansa Newswire. My question is a general one. So looking at the two very complex wars that are going on, Ukraine and Israel and Gaza in the Middle East, do you see any glimpse of hope for progress of any kind next week during, all the on-the-record, off-the-record meetings and speeches during the high-level week? Thank you.
Well, hope is a very sensible topic. But what is toxic to hope is giving up. So this is really the moment where we underline that we are not only not giving up, but that we are more committed than ever to deliver on the most important task of this United Nations to ensure peace and security. And the GA has set up a strong call for both conflicts in many resolutions, but also lately in the last weeks, putting up the question of the right to Ukraine for their own sovereign state, again on the agenda of the General Assembly, and also the declaration of New York with regard to the two-state solution and the Gaza situation. So obviously, and I think these are the questions many people ask, so what does paper help? Yeah, a declaration doesn't help at all in a moment. But in this paper is a clear commitment of 142 countries that the latest developments in Gaza are unacceptable, that the humanitarian situation is catastrophic, and that we need instead an immediate, unconditional, permanent ceasefire, rapid, safe and unhindered delivery on humanitarian aid to Palestinians, and an unconditional release of all Israeli hostages. So the expectation for this concrete conference is that head of states who are joining this conference are not only talking about, but discussing with each other how we can enable the steps. And same goes for the situation in Ukraine, to take every single tiny step as it is to improve the situation. And I would like to underline, because I have heard that so many questions, but because these horrible wars haven't stopped, should we not just finish the whole UN? But we should never forget that the UN is way more than just a decision being taken in Security Council or in the General Assembly. Imagine we wouldn't have had the UN in the last almost 2 years with regard of Gaza. Would there be more humanitarian aid? Not at all. The delivery, way too little because it was hindered, but it was there because UN staff, UN people on the ground, UNRWA, World Food Programme, so many others brought in. Every truck delivered the food. Same counts for Ukraine. Would we be better off with the people of Ukraine? Would we be better off with no United Nations? When heating system, when water system have been destroyed, it was the international community, it was the UN delivering sources not only of hope, but of life and death, like water, like heating when it's minus 20 degrees. So remembering all of us together that for the reason that there's a blockage, it doesn't mean that all the good work, which is so often overseen, doesn't count at all. It's just the moment where we have to work harder that we overcome the blockages. And again, I think last week is a good example. Also the initiatives of the General Assembly saying if there's a veto in Security Council, the General Assembly take up its responsibility for peace and security.
Thank you, Lenise. Madam President, Xu Deju with China Central Television. It's also a general question. You just mentioned how important the United Nations is still there. For sure, next week you will meet a lot of world leaders. What message are you going to tell them, and what concrete steps do you expect them to make the UN still strong place? For example, contributions or budget for humanitarian operations. And in that connection, how are you going to work with the SG to push for UNGA80 initiative while maintaining effective of this organization? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I start with the second part of your question. Better together is a team sport. And the UN is the biggest team in the world we can have. So everybody should ask themselves, and this is why I invited all heads of states in their speeches to ask themselves, what has my country contributed to the world team? What has my country delivered to make the UN a stronger place? And also reflect, as we have so much negative spinning in the world, what has the UN brought to my country? And if you ask that question a bit more from normal people's life, I mean, in every country, big or small, rich or less developed, without the UN, every country would be weaker. So if we are asking ourselves this question, without the UN, like coming back from my country, would there have been a reunification of my country? Other countries, would they exist without the United Nations? We had colonialism all over the world after this institution was founded. So the birth of many countries was due to this United Nations. In recent time, a pandemic like COVID doesn't have any passport. Could one single nation alone, no matter how big the army is or how big the GDP, could have stopped that virus? No, we could have only done that together. So my invitation to head of states for this high-level week is to embrace the motto of better together, underline why everybody is better if we join forces together. And then to become a bit more concrete, jumping to the first part of this question, this means also for myself as PGA, embrace the UNGA80 reform process set up by the Secretary General. It has been crystal clear, again, we can only do it together. So the work of the GA, of the OPGA has already started in the last days. The ad hoc working group, the informal working group for the mandate review, a very important pillar of the UNGA80 process, just started yesterday. We all met together. We have great co-facilitators, co-chairs for that working group to reflect ourselves. So how can we make our work in the General Assembly more efficient? To adapt to a world where we have artificial intelligence, use facts more than tons of paper. And I was, even though I learned in the past that jokes at press conference are not the best way to move forward, but I try a bit with a smiling face as well. I said yesterday also to all the PRs, when I'm doing all the handshakes, which were just mentioned before, I will also see if every head of state has heard already about UNGA80 reform process, because if we don't bring that process to the capitals, if the heads of states, if every individual country doesn't embrace this reform, we cannot succeed. So if we want to make our United Nations stronger, then we would need the commitments from all the governments around the world to reflect not only in nice speeches how they can support the UN, but also when you have the next discussion in your parliament about the budget and funding of the United Nations, when we can discuss ourselves what are the most important challenges besides peace and security, fighting climate crisis, supporting human rights and sustainable development. So this will be kind of the talking points for all the different bilateral meetings I'm going to have with heads of states.
Thank you so much, Madam President. My name is Ephraim Kosaifi with Arab News Daily. Madam President, I know that as the PGA now you have checked your national identity at the door and you are now representing the whole world. But just to clear the air, I'm sure you're well aware of the controversy that your comment on the status of civilian infrastructures in Gaza, which was interpreted as carte blanche for those infrastructures to be bombed, when you said they would lose their protected status under international law if there are terrorists around, and that was conceived to mean that you are encouraging the strikes on civilian infrastructure from schools, from UNRWA facilities, hospitals, and all of that. When you were asked about that, you said you were misquoted. Can you please set the record straight? What did you mean by that comment? Do you retract it? Do you distance yourself from it? Just so we clear the air before moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I've been asked that many times, but I would like to repeat it again. It is crystal clear that international humanitarian law calls for the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. They must be protected always. And I've been also crystal clear on that one in the past, in the speeches, but I'm here again, that civilians must not be targeted. Full stop. And then you asked about why I said, please look at the correct speeches, because this is a moment, I mean, with social media, yeah? If you say we have only 20 seconds, so we cut off the beginning of a sentence or we cut off the ends, it totally changes the course. And therefore, thank you for asking this question again. But what I've said is exactly this. International humanitarian law calls for the protection of civilian and civilian infrastructure. And I said also before and after that international law also calls that civilian cannot be misused, that also the misuse of civilian sites for military purposes is not allowed in international law. And I think this is very well also reflected in the current declaration of New York with regard to the peaceful settlement. And this is the work I've done the last 2 years, and I will continue to do based on our United Nations Charter. Because if you look at the declaration of New York on the two-state solution, it's saying exactly that we are not all looking on one side only, but we need an immediate ceasefire for humanitarian access. We need an immediate ceasefire for releasing the hostages. It calls on the stop of the war in Gaza, on the Israeli side to stop that war. It calls on Hamas to lay down its weapons, that Hamas cannot rule it. And this full picture that peace can be only delivered if it's peace for all was something I was standing for in the past, is something I'm standing for right now. At the moment, I will stand for in the future, because this is exactly what our United Nations Charter obliges us to do. A life is a life, no matter where a person has been born. Every life matters the same.
So just to be clear, nothing justifies, as the international law says, nothing at all justifies any attack on any civilian infrastructure, no matter what warfare is taking place during in that place, right?
Well, this
Nothing.
is not an international public law lecture here, but we have treaties on that one, exactly, and on that one, and maybe next time we bring it all together here. So in international humanitarian law, we have the Geneva Convention. It is very clear that civilians always have to be protected. It's very clear that the misuse of civilian places for military means is also a breach of international law. And all this together, in a nutshell, was what I have been saying in the past. But it's all this together, which we always have in mind, and no cherry picking on these kind of issues.
And then you, sir. So the next 3 questions, and then we will continue as we can. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Edith Lederer from the Associated Press, and nice to see you in that chair. For decades, the General Assembly has been focusing on reform of the UN Security Council, and for decades it has gone nowhere. What are your plans to try and move this process forward to even having any kind of a vote or some kind of a real indication of where the divisions are and what might need to be addressed to try and get some action?
Well, thank you very much. I'm not a big fan of promising things where you know you cannot deliver on, so I want to be very realistic from the beginning on. The role of the PGA is limited to 365 days, maybe even 363 days. So the role of the PGA is not to solve all the problems which have been there over decades. And as you have mentioned, the reform of the Security Council is a long-standing topic. Thanks God, there have been many others who worked on that. So step by step, obviously there was not the perfect reform, because it needs agreement from everybody, especially from those in the Security Council and especially from the permanent members. But there have been many smaller steps, and I think we shouldn't underestimate again also the success of the smaller steps. So the question if you just raised, if there's a veto, there has been the initiative in the past already with regard to, then it's been transferred to the General Assembly already long time ago, but with a new movement of explanation of a veto in the General Assembly, we have seen that on many recent topics, the General Assembly has taken a stand. not by unanimity, but by a last and big majority on these kind of matters. And this process will continue also in the 80th session. We just started with this process last week when we had the vote on exactly what I mentioned before, the situation in Gaza, the two-state solution. This was a vote with regard to the situation that also before the Security Council has been blocked on many resolutions in this regard. And this will continue also in the 80th session. In the different resolutions, we have this ongoing process of the working group, also with regard of the reform of the Security Council. But this goes besides the big reform process of UNGA80. And as I said before, we focus being very realistic, especially on the tasks where we can and hopefully will deliver, and this is a mandate review process, which our timetable is also very, very ambitious. End of February, we want to deliver on that one.
You, just one question, and then you, sir. Got it. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you very much. I'm Evelyn Leopold from the Dag Hammarskjöld Fund for Journalists. It's an NGO that has been in session since 1961, 1962, and there are contests of people mainly from developing countries to get a seat in it. 3 of them are here from South Africa, from Brazil, from Pakistan, and they all are dying to have an interview with you. But meanwhile, I have a personal message for you. We have a mutual friend, and I promise to deliver the message. So Grüße von Tanit Koch. And we'll speak later about her, and Evchen too. Thank you. That's right.
Yes, you have the next question. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. My name is Sinan Tunçdemir from Ruda Media Network, and sincerely thank you for smiley face and good luck with 195 countries. I have a question. I wonder what you think about that. What do you think will be the biggest challenge in implementing a vision where the rights of minorities are constantly respected and advocated for within the UN, especially given their lack of direct representation at the UN? For example, there are more than 40 million Kurds. They've been divided by 4 countries, and they don't have a representative at the United Nations. They don't have a seat. I wonder what you think about that. And I have a really quick second question. Can you confirm that the Syrian interim president is coming to UN next week? If yes, don't you think the UN should delist him from the terrorist list, then invite him for a speech? And if you don't think so, don't you think this is a double standard? Thank you very much.
Well, maybe again, starting with the second part, there's an ongoing movement of who's coming and who's not coming. And as this is the individual situation and decision of every head of states by him or herself, if she's coming, I cannot confirm or not confirm who personally is coming or not, because there have been, even in the last 24 hours, changes to a yes and a no, and no to yes. So we have to see on Monday, on Tuesday, who is here in town. And we have very, very clear regulations with regard to this dear institution. Also on the numbers, so it's a General Assembly to decide who is a permanent member, who is a member. We have observer countries, but it's up to the General Assembly and not the individual decision of the President. So 193 currently I'm representing. And if there are changes by the General Assembly, then obviously also the numbers will change. This doesn't hinder that minority rights are a very important task for this United Nations, because we have, besides the Charter, we have all our other important treaties like the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, also the protection of minority. So this is also the place where every voice is being heard and can be heard counted also to different minorities, including the Kurds, which have been heard here also at the United Nations. With regard to the question of access to the meetings and the attendance, again, also there the rules are very, very clear, though there's a host country agreement or UN headquarters agreement with legal obligations of the host country. This concerns also the President Abbas issue. There have been many questions there as well. And so it's very, very clear that this is a place which should provide the opportunity to come together and debate, and this is regulated in the UN headquarters agreement. But we have to see who is intending to come and who is not intending to come, and the role is for me to give everybody the chance based on the UN headquarters agreement.
Yes, the gentleman in the plaid shirt. No, the one
Hi.
behind you. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam President. Over here. Quick question on the two-state solution. You talked about the fact that David Hamelberg, Fox News. You talked about the fact that, yes, it is just a piece of paper, but it is a meaningful piece of paper. My question is, if you can explain the legality of recognizing the state of Palestine, and the reason why I ask is because various UN Security Council resolutions and the Oslo Accords have always stated that the final solution will be negotiated between the two parties. Now, considering that there's no negotiation, it is a sort of a one-sided declaration that there will be a Palestinian state. But what does that actually mean? Can you explain to us what that means legally and what that means going forward? Thank you.
I'm sorry, because this might be a bit boring for you, because I know how media also works. But I've been sworn in as President of the General Assembly to represent the 193 member states, its decisions, and its resolutions. I've not been sworn in as a professor for international law, so this is up to other competent bodies. I might have personal opinions about it and also legal thoughts about it, but the question about how to define a state and the powers, there are many, many classes and theories about it. The UN General Assembly has been very clear on that question with regard to ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that it cannot be ended peacefully by war, by occupation, by terrorism, but only by peace negotiations, as you cited also Oslo and other records, and that there is a right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and their own state. This has also been very clear. And we are for decades in this kind of situation, and this is why the resolutions underlines that for the moment the most important thing is immediate ceasefire, but it also describes all the other steps with regard to peace negotiations and also towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. So this is what this resolution represents. This is what I'm representing here. And if we can deliver on it or not, this is in the hands of the member states of the United Nations.
Hi, thank you all so much. I am so sorry. We actually have to make way for the new briefing. I think that we actually have to go on to our next meeting, and I think Steph needs to start the noon briefing.
Online questions, please.
I am so sorry. I know that there is great interest. This will not be the only opportunity that you will have to speak with her. And I am so sorry that we have to take our leave, but thank you all so much for your questions. And so, I'm so sorry. But the PGA schedule, we are actually already running behind.
Thank you.